Connor, hello. I'm really pleased that we can have this chat today.
Lovely to see you, Jessica.
Yeah, and we're really excited because you are the Canberra Symphony Orchestra's 2023 Composer in Connection. And one of the aspects of that is that you have written us a new piece for our Chamber Classics series. And
Yeah,
it's our Watercolours program, which is on the 5th of March. And it fits into our overall scheme, my kind of vision for this year, which is, well, the whole year is based on the idea of music and colour. So all of the season centres on composers who have a close connection to colour. And we've been speaking about this a lot,
yeah,
and tried to find some kind of inspiration for your piece that you've written for this series. Tell me a little bit about how did you find the
yeah,
inspiration for this work?
yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the Derek Jarman book, Chroma, that you had been reading and very inspired by
Mm.
in how you kind of curated the season. So I actually went away and I bought a copy. It's sitting somewhere on one of my bookshelves here in my studio, and had a read of it. And yeah, his beautiful, beautiful language. And although we couldn't use a text from the book for licensing, copyright, those kind of reasons, I ended up going and reading a lot of the little bits and pieces of stuff that he quoted in the book,
Yeah.
and he had and there was a really fascinating book that I found by Gertrude Jekyll, who's a British garden designer and horticulturist, from the turn of the 19th century
Mm.
into the 20th century. And her writing, I found that her book itself was like what chroma was to talking about color. It was her book to talking about different types of plants and kind
Right.
of looking at them. But her language was very colorful and very interesting. And I kind of love texts and things that are kind of talking about the mundane in a very beautiful way.
Hmm.
Um, and so I found this, and Derek quotes this one excerpt where she talks about flowers, how what flowers that we think of as white are never quite white. They always are slightly pale blue or pale yellow and stuff like that. And I thought that was a really beautifully written passage. So I set that one. And it was kind of this interesting thing. It kind of spoke to this idea of these subtle variations in similar looking thing, kind of spoke to the kind of way I construct passages of music, and using seemingly something that repeats and is quite minimal and repetitive, but actually is constantly changing and never quite the same.
I mean, it's really fascinating and really great, actually, to think that a whole season can be kind of inspired by a book
Yeah.
written by Derek Jarman, and that
Hmm.
actually you've read it and then it's taken on a whole different life. I mean,
Yeah.
flowers, we weren't really expecting that. And these slight incremental changes in
Hmm.
color and texture in
Yeah.
your piece. You've composed this work for soprano, Chloe
Mhm.
Langshere. What's the other instrumentation? Share a
It
little bit
was
of it.
So it was it's for all of it. It's kind of the one piece in the watercolors program that kind of brings together all three players who are on the program. So violin, piano, and soprano, which was really lovely. There's something very interesting about writing for soprano and a solo violin in the same
Mm-hmm.
piece is kind
Mm-hmm.
of interesting because they have the same. I mean, the violin can play up into the stratosphere, of course, but like the core range is the same as the soprano. It pretty
Yeah.
much overlaps, or at least particularly Chloe's range. Chloe kind of goes down a little bit further than most sopranos, right to I think her lowest note that she's comfortable singing is the same as the open G string, the lowest
Yeah.
note of the violin. So it's
A
interesting playing.
human violin.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of there's this interesting kind of play between these two instruments that kind of can occupy the same range, the pitch range,
Yeah.
which was kind of interesting to play with. And often you would look at that, and in orchestration textbooks and stuff like that, they would, you'd kind of want to space things out so things don't get muddy. So
Mm.
things don't, you kind of don't, you so you wouldn't lose what is what, and if things don't get too mixed up. But I actually kind of like playing with that, which is kind of what I've done here. Actually, a little tidbit is that actually when I was writing this piece, what is now the violin line was the vocal line. So I had written the whole piece with what the violin is playing as what the vocal line was going to be, and decided I didn't like it, but I moved the whole thing down into the violin line and then rewrote a new vocal line over the top, which kind of worked out really nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe in a year or so we could have a theme and variations. Very for orchestra, everyone playing this theme in their tessitura somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it feeds back, it's so linked to this sort of poetry, these poetic words by Gertrude Jekyll, in terms of these just subtle inflections and how one thing can look a particular color, but actually is just slightly shifted off to it. And it's in a program as well, with some Debussy and some Fauré. So I think it will be the kind of event where audiences can come to and just have this wonderful sound wash over them, wash through them even.
A lovely way to spend a Sunday afternoon.
Exactly. Connor, thanks so much for chatting with me.
My pleasure.
A pleasure as always. See you soon.